with her like Mexican waitress outfit is what it really looks like
She also
to me.
became very bohemian too. Her tight bun came out, and she had rouge on. Added fullness changes your life.
And Mary said, I didn't realize there were slopers for other things. The truth is, in fashion in particular, you start with a sloper of everything. You can start with a sloper of everything, and we will continue to work with slopers. The sloper is a really good tool to be able to get you to understand the basic bare bones of it all. You know, it's one of the things that we've talked about many, many times in this class so far are variables. It's the thing that has the least number of variables, so it's an easy thing to be able to start with. And then we start throwing more variables into the mix to be able to soup it up a little bit. So today, it's time to start with sleeve slopers. In order to do sleeve slopers, you think back to your torso sloper. How did we begin that process?
With a form pattern.
You had a formula, i.e. a set of directions that generated a basic pattern. And what else did you have besides the basic directions to begin with?
Measurements.
You had a set of measurements. So today we're going to talk about measurements of arms. So, can someone please get us...
An arm.
No.
I was about to say.
Well, we're going to use one of your arms, but we need a tape measure. Because to be able to generate your sleeve sloper, you're going to need a specific set of measurements. And I'm going to show you what those are and how to take them.
I remember these.
They're a little less obvious than some of the ones we've already taken. When you go to generate, and I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, like all of the Tartuffe coats, all of these sleeves, they all started out with slopers. Are you telling me I have shit on my face?
I think it was a thread. You got it.
Okay.
I'm glad that went so well. Sometimes
I would have told you
no,
since you're on
sometimes
camera.
I do this for like 2 minutes and people are like, 5.
To be able to generate the sleeve, as I said, for all of this show, I started off with sleeve slopers on all of them. For me, that makes sense for my brain. And one of the things you will start to see is, while it's relatively straightforward to drape a sloper for a torso, it's very difficult to drape a sleeve sloper. It's very difficult to drape a trouser sloper. Sleeves and trousers, unlike bodices and skirts, have 3 dimensions to them. What do I mean by that? I mean that, you know, we were talking about how generally speaking, all of these planes are 2-dimensional in the torso. In a skirt, it's the same way. It's a 2-dimensional plane that sort of does this. With trousers and sleeves, you start to have a 3rd dimension that has to go into it as it wraps around something else. And so that tends to make it a little difficult to drape. And so as a result, I will always suggest starting with the sleeve sloper. You will see in the long run, there's also math that goes into sleeve slopers. One of the things that Mary just started to do when I started talking about sleeves was she started doing this to Kristen's 4. She started playing around with the armhole. And the math to get the 2 pieces to fit together starts to become super important. And so that's the other reason I work with a sloper. In order to be able to generate a sleeve sloper, you will need the following measurements.
Dun, dun, dun.
You will need bicep. You will need elbow. You will need wrist. You will need underarm to wrist. And you will need cap height. So let's talk about those 5 measurements for a minute. Bicep, elbow, and wrist. Mary, you were just saying you remember when all these measurements were taken on you. There's something that's important about when we take these measurements. What is it?
The bicep is flexed.
We do all of these measurements flexed, not relaxed. Why do we do them flexed?
So you can move around.
Can you be a little more specific?
Like if you were to flex while you're wearing it, you wouldn't like really.
You take
Exactly.
up more room flex.
We want to be taking into account the maximum circumference of these things, which Catherine is exactly right. When you start to move, the muscles start to flex. And truth be told, especially on stage, that becomes super important. I have to, we spent 5 minutes at the top of yesterday's run of the show working with Paige moving that stupid statue off stage. And a little bit of the a little bit of the conversation had to do with what can she do with her arms to be able to get that thing off stage in her sleeves and in her costume. So it becomes really super important. So when you go to take the measurement, you're flexing and you're going for the largest point around the bicep. So you're going to find it, and then you're going to wrap your tape measure around the widest point of the bicep. Can you flex your elbow?
No, but you could bend it.
No, but you can bend it, Mary says. Why does she say that? Because the bend to elbow has a larger circumference than a relaxed to elbow. I mean, you can feel it on yourself. So you want the elbow completely bent when you go to take that measurement as well. Wrist, you definitely want flexed, but unless you're some ridiculous bodybuilder, hopefully there's not a giant difference between your relaxed wrist and your flexed wrist. I can see on mine, these muscles sort of change location and they pop out a little bit, but it's not like...
Are we making a sloper that will come down to the wrist?
You are making a sleeve sloper that will come all the way to the wrist. And so when you do that wrist measurement, you actually want to do it around this bone right here in the wrist, which I should know what that is from when I broke my wrist a year ago, but I can't remember what it is. It's either the radius or the ulna. That bone always protrudes, so you want to make sure you're taking it around that.
It's the ulna because the radius rotates over. It's your ulna.
For yours it does. In my left arm, it doesn't do that so much anymore. That's why I can do this, but I can only do this.
Wait, what?
I can do this.
You can't go as far.
I can't go as far this way without straining now.
Oh, I remember that.
Underarm to wrist. I hope that one is relatively self-explanatory. Underarm is right here, wrist is here. The thing that you want to do when this measurement is taken is you want to do it when the arm is hanging at the side. You don't want to do it when it's straight out. Why? They change. And in this particular instance, when it's relaxed at your side, it's actually shorter. And we like that. Because you'll see in a minute, what we're sort of trying to do is find the extremes of the arm, its absolute shortest and its absolute longest, and that's going to help us later. So the other reason is it's much easier to find the hinge point of the arm where the pit actually is when the arm is hanging at its side. It's much more nebulous when you pull it out this way. So that measurement is taken down the inside of the arm, and again, it's taken to that wrist point. It's a little difficult because on the inside of the arm, where's the wrist to end? So what you kind of have to do is you have to visualize where this measurement was taken, that circumference measurement is taken, and then be able to see where that ends. The last measurement that you need to generate your sleeve sloper is what's called cap height. This is the kind of the weirdest measurement of the group. If you think way back to the first week of class, we talk about balance points briefly in the arm. The balance points are where the musculature wraps across from the torso to the arm. You've got this point here where the pec wraps across, and you've got this point here where I think it's either the quad or the lat wraps across. And so you can feel that actually defines the hinge point of the arm. That's what allows it to go up and down. This creates the cap. This is where we start. I'm going to start over. These 2 points, if you connect them like this, that actually creates an invisible line right there. The distance from that line up to the top of the arm is what defines the cap height. if Mary remembers, anybody who's taken measurements, we actually take 2 measurements up here. We take both cap width and cap height. You don't need to worry about cap width for your sleeve sloper, but you are worried about cap height. So again, we always take cap width first because it's the line that connects balance point to balance point across the outside of the arm.
So it's connecting from the armpit out on
Kind
the
of.
outside.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's defining the upper portion of the armhole versus the lower portion of the armhole. You're exactly right. Because if the armhole is an oval, which it is, you can see it right there, it sort of bisects the whole thing in half. So that creates an imaginary line here. We measure from that line up. The question is, from up to where? Where do we go? I like that Catherine's starting to poke herself again. Feel your musculature. You know, you've all experienced at one point or another some Barbie doll or something like that that had its arm ripped off,
Yeah.
right? And generally, when you look at that arm, it does this, and then there's a flat side to it, and it comes over like that, right? And then the torso of the Barbie tends to look something like this. So you're trying to find that point where, if you were to rip the arm off, the arm would end. This is what we refer to as the arm's eye or the armhole. And so you can feel on your body where you stop being arm and start being shoulder. There's kind of a confluence, an intersection of a couple of different bones right there. If you think back to your sloper, did you have to do any? I can't remember in this recipe. A lot of sloper recipes have you start off with your basic measurements and then, well, we actually did it with your, I'm going to start over. A lot of sloper directions have you do what are called adjusted measurements. And so, you know, you take this measurement and then you do something to it, and then the adjusted measurement is what you work with. For all of these measurements, there is a slight adjustment to them. So your first step is to generate all 5 of those measurements. The second step is to generate a list of adjusted. You're going to take your bicep measurement and you're going to add 2 inches to it. Straight off the bat. So much like when we talked about the actual bust point versus the adjusted bust point, now we're talking about the actual bicep measurement versus the adjusted bicep measurement. The elbow is +1.
Inch?
Correct. And the wrist is +1/4. Underarm to wrist is +1.5. And cap height is +1.5.
Sorry, for the wrist, is it only 1/4 of an inch? Or is it-
Correct.
Okay.
1/4 inch. It's very, very small. Why are we adjusting these? It has to do with that flexion. That's the difference between that and that. You know, it could be up to 2 inches. In the wrist, it's probably much smaller. For Wednesday's class, you are going to pattern, cut out, and assemble a sleeve sloper that works for your arm. Okay. That fits you. So, what I'd like for you guys to do real quickly is let's grab another tape measure and have somebody take your measurements on you, and let's write them down real quick. If we can be done in 5, then that will give us enough time to demo the entire process quickly before you have to go.
We're